radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear. Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show. Today is November 11th, 2016. It's normally call-in Friday, but today we have a special guest on. It is Karl Grossman, a new friend to our show, so I want to thank you, Karl, for joining us right away.
Always a pleasure, Lonnie.
That's really awesome. I'm actually grateful that we get to talk today, the day after I feel like we've been boomeranged backwards 70 years. I know many people listening to this radio show that are followers of this station really did support Trump. They really do believe that Trump was the way out, that he was the anti-establishment guy, that he's going to bring a new way, a new order, and he's going to stand up to this, the drain the swamp types of people that think that, really believe that he is swamp drainer, so to speak. I mean, they may have taken back, the Republicans may have taken back we now face a Republican entire government. They're going to have the Supreme Court, the Senate, the Congress, and the White House.
And these Lonnie, are not middle-of-the-road Republicans.
No.
I mean, there's been, from my state of New York, there's been Jacob Javits. There have been very solid Republicans.
They're not our
years.
Reagan Republicans. Let's put it to you that way.
Well,
Reagan would look like a flaming liberal to these Republicans.
Well, what Trump and his little cadre of Rudy Giuliani and Newt Gingrich and Chris Christie. I mean, this is, I think in terms of what you said, going back 70 years is the chronological point here. And, I mean, I've been a journalist in America for over 50 years. I began in 1962 as a reporter. And I've covered politics. I remember covering the National Convention here in New York, where Carter was nominated. I interviewed the first George Bush, George McGovern. I mean, I've covered politics pretty intensely out of New York. It's my base, and I have never heard the term in my time fascism. If I was around working as a journalist in the 30s, but I wasn't born then, I would have heard the term fascism. So that's when, in terms of your number, we go back 70 years. It's about right, and very, very cool heads are calling what's happening as possibly the beginnings of fascism. For example, David Remnick, who is the editor of the New Yorker magazine, a very, very competent journalist, and I think probably the best thing so far written about, the best piece about this horrifying, this disastrous election of Trump was by Remnick. It's online. The title is An American Tragedy. And he says in this piece, fascism is not our future. It cannot be. We cannot allow it to be so, but this is surely the way fascism can begin. Or Andrew Sullivan, who's also a very respected journalist, a conservative, in fact, he wrote, this is just a few weeks ago, in New York Magazine, in his piece, America and the Abyss, we are told we cannot use the term fascist to describe this. I'm at loss to find a more accurate alternative. I mean, this is way beyond Reagan. This is way beyond Nixon. This is a man who does not. Well, if I could, let me just read the beginning of Remnick's piece. I could say it no better at all. The election of Trump is nothing less than a tragedy for the American Republic, a tragedy for the Constitution, and a triumph for the forces at home and abroad. And I bet Remnick, who covered the Soviet Union and Russia for the New Yorker magazine, was thinking of Trump's buddy, Vladimir Putin, at home and abroad, of nativism, authoritarianism, misogyny, and racism. It is impossible to react to this moment with anything less, Remnick writes, than revulsion and profound anxiety. And then he goes on, there are inevitably miseries to come, an increasingly reactionary Supreme Court, an emboldened right-wing Congress, a president whose disdain for women and minorities, civil liberties, and scientific fact. I mean, we'll talk this morning on Trump's view on nuclear and other environmental and identity issues. To say nothing of simple decency, Remnick goes on, has been repeatedly demonstrated. Trump is vulgarity unbound, a knowledge-free national leader who will not only set markers tumbling, but will strike fear into the heart of the vulnerable, the weak, and above all, the many other, with a capital O, whom he has so deeply insulted. And one of the things, very wisely, that Remnick is warning against is normalizing the election of Trump, making it look like, well, it's, an election, maybe the bad guys win some of the time, but this is even beyond the bad guys winning. And the term normalize is one that I'm on the board of a very wonderful and anti-nuclear organization, Beyond Nuclear. Just check out the website of beyondnuclear.org, and you'll see all the great things that Beyond Nuclear has been doing. And one of the things that we've been talking about as a board at Beyond Nuclear in recent times is fighting the attempt by the nuclear promoters to normalize radioactivity, to with all kind of baloney, make people think, well, we got to normalize radioactivity. You got to accept that we live in a radioactive world and there's background radiation. But what they don't want to say is that, that background radiation kills X number of people, so many people every year with cancer. And you increase that level of radioactivity, you're going to kill more and more people with cancer and other diseases. So you can't allow these nuclear Pinocchios to normalize radioactivity. And here, and it's not a majority. I think it's so telling that the popular vote was for Hillary Clinton, with all her faults, but the popular vote was not for Donald Trump. He's won by a minority vote in terms of the popular vote. I mean, this electoral college system has to go. In any case, we can't normalize.
It's not going with a total Republican government. They love the electoral college. I mean, this is really, this is a frightening event. It hit home to me last night. Last night I was up, just about to go to bed at 12:30. My daughter called me. She had basically gone down to the protests, but she left. She was getting in her car. As soon as she saw the military police roll up, she was like, she knew that there was violence that they were going to be instigating. So she started leaving. As she was leaving to go to her car 3 blocks away by herself, a car rolled up with a Trump hat screaming at her saying, "Just wait till he gets inaugurated. We can rape any of you that we want." This is emboldening. Her neighbors got a note from their own neighbors posted on their door that said, she sent me a picture of it. It said, "Your kind's not wanted here anymore." And they are a gay couple. And that's what they were talking about.
And this is Portland, Oregon.
Yes.
I mean, maybe some arch right-wing town in Idaho you would associate with this kind of conduct, this kind of behavior.
The KKK hats are coming out already. I mean, it is very frightening. And honestly, I listen to the YouTubes. I'm a YouTuber, Karl, and I listen to the YouTubes, and all these people are saying George Soros is funding this and busing people around the country to stir up hate. No, it's not. It is emboldening. Even if, let's say he did decide, because to be honest, I am no friend of Hillary Clinton. I think she is a fascist. To be honest, this is how I view the election. No, excuse my language, but we were handed shit sandwiches. The choice was, you want the old shit sandwich or you want the new shit sandwich? People have picked the new one, not because we know the evil that the old one gave us. We know. I personally she stole the election from Bernie Sanders, and talk about normalizing. The Democrats have the nerve to come out and say, would it have been different if Bernie had won? Bernie did win. That's why people were angry, and that's why people are in the streets. Bernie did win. We know there was election fraud. And then the media switched off their investigative reports and acted like it was normal, like she was normal, the most unpopular person. Now, why did the Democratic Party steal the nomination from Bernie Sanders when they knew across the board he would mop the floor with any Republican? Why is that? Because they were protecting the bankers. So they stabbed their own base in the back and lost big time.
There's no question that many voters felt that the Clintons represented, quote, the establishment, and they wanted to strike back at the establishment.
It's not, Karl, I disagree with you. It's not the establishment. It's the evil that they represent.
But in voting for Trump, in putting this man in office,
or not
a lot of your listeners are listening because of the title of your show, The Age of Fission and Nuclear Power. Let me talk about some of the positions on nuclear of Donald Trump. This is on Fox News after the Japanese disaster at Fukushima began. I mean, it's ongoing. Here's Trump saying on Fox News, nuclear is the way to go.
True that.
Nuclear is a way we get what we have to get, which is energy. I'm in favor of nuclear energy, very strongly in favor of nuclear energy. And then he goes on Fox, if a plane goes down, people keep flying. If you get into an auto crash, people keep driving. I mean, he didn't have the sense, the brains to understand that what Fukushima and Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and the many other nuclear plant accidents represent, not an auto accident and you got to keep driving, represent so loudly and so clearly the toxic reality, not even the potential, the toxic reality of nuclear technology and how we have to go to safe, clean, green energy. And on safe, clean, green energy, I mean, you wouldn't believe some of Obama's comments. For example, wind farms, which are so important. And here's a statement by Obama on Trump on wind farms. Not only are wind farms disgusting looking, but even worse, they are bad for people's health. I mean, this kind of nonsense, this kind of idiocy. We lived through Reagan and his stupidity.
Karl, look, this is what I mean. We got served, no offense, shit sandwiches. Clinton is no better. She is super pro-nuclear. She actually went to the Japanese prime minister and promised not to test our food for radioactive contamination. We now import food into the United States thanks to her that is so radioactive you cannot sell it in Japan. So that there was two things that Hillary Clinton did. That was one. The other one was laughing on tape about killing and murdering Gaddafi. Those were two unforgivable sins for me that I will not ever get over.
Well, I mean, I'd rather not debate the election. It happened, and I'm not going to defend at all Clinton's position. I mean, she's switched 9 times on nuclear power. Maybe she would have. Maybe she would have switched.
Look,
it's happened, and now we have Trump.
She would not have. She would not have decided to put in Supreme Court justices that are going to roll back people's rights, women's rights. Well, she would not be emboldening the racists. The KKK hats would not be out in the streets today.
Well, and in terms of these environmental and energy issues, which are, to me, that we're not talking here about the scenery. We're not talking about this is a nicer place to live than that place. We're talking about life and death. Trump is out. I mean, he wants to do this in his first 100 days to break the Paris Agreement, to withdraw the United States from this so important agreement aimed at climate change, at global warming.
We've already asked the Canadians to please reapply for the XL pipeline. Their campaign has already reached out to the Canadians and said, please reapply for the XL pipeline, because when we get in, we'll have it all ready. That'll be one of our priorities.
Well, on fracking, again, an enthusiastic, here I'm reading an article from Real Clear Politics, Trump, an enthusiastic supporter of the controversial gas attraction process of fracking. Here's a quote from Trump: "Fracking will lead to American energy independence." Yeah, it'll lead also to, I'm sure many of your listeners have seen the Josh Fox's important 2 documentaries, Gasland and Gasland 2, where people all over America who live where fracking is occurring open their faucets, and there's a match put next to the water going out.
They've already fracked. I mean, Obama opened it up, but it is going to get way worse.
The EPA. I wrote a book years ago about the faults of the EPA and the Food and Drug Administration, and how they're very cozy with industry historically, and how this goes back actually in American history. A book I wrote in the 1980s on this issue. But Trump isn't talking about making the EPA even more friendlier with industry. Trump is talking about how he wants to eliminate the EPA.
Yes, he does.
I mean, just if I could go on some of these other things. Asbestos. And this is something that goes back to our grandparents' time.
Right.
I mean, this was produced...
70 years, Karl. I meant it.
Well, truly. Asbestos, a cancer-causing substance, and the company Johns Manville, all these asbestos being used in structures and houses, and this cancer-causing substance. And I present in my book how John Mansville, in fact, knew all along that this stuff was cancer-causing. And finally, when it hit the fan and everybody became aware, John Mansville declared bankruptcy, so it would try to get out of liability. Now, here's Trump, his own quote on asbestos. Asbestos is the greatest fireproofing material ever used, and everybody in the construction industry knows it. It is also 100% safe, but early on, asbestos got a bad rap because of the fact that miners who were digging asbestos would develop asbestosis. Well, yeah, the miners were victims, but so were people all over this country of asbestos. What's going to happen with asbestos? I mean, it just goes on and on.
I know.
You got to remember that the Republican Party.
Dumbfounded. People do not understand. I mean, they like. A lot of people that voted for Trump really are anti-Clinton voters, and they genuinely believe that he's just a regular conservative kind of guy who's never been in business, so he's going to take the lead from Paul Ryan and from Mike Pence, and that those are decent human beings, which is the farthest thing from the truth. I mean, these people could care less. Their whole plan, I mean, these people, they do not understand. A lot of people that voted for Trump are living on Social Security, which is they're going to work to privatize it and get rid of it. A lot of people that voted for Trump are using services through the government that they don't even recognize that are services through the government. And all these services, I mean, to be honest, Trump is a threat. I believe that the Trump-Pence administration is a threat to our American Constitution. They have no regard for the law.
Absolutely, Lonnie. And let me touch on another environmental issue, and also make the point again, this is not just Trump. I mean, Trump has the most arch of right-wingers as his vice president, this man Pence, but, and then I mentioned before, Chris Christie and Giuliani, and Newt Gingrich. I mean, this cast of characters, but it's beyond that. I mean, I don't know if too many listeners are aware that the Republican Party's committee that was drafting the 2016 platform for the Republican Party, and here I'm reading off the TPM, which is very responsible website, TPM Insight. In a nail-biting vote Monday, the committee tasked with writing the Republican Party's 2016 platform voted to return federal lands, in other words, national parks and national forests, to states immediately. What this group wants to do, and this is a group which is solidly in the middle of the Republican Party, and Trump will happily be its leader. It wants to get rid of. I mean, I did a lecture. I teach environmental journalism at the State University of New York College at Old Westbury, and I spent a class 2 weeks ago on John Muir from your part of the world, the West Coast, the founder of the Sierra Club, the man who really was so responsible for the creation of our national park systems. And most of the students, my students are SUNY College at Old Westbury is 25 miles from Manhattan. So most of my students are city kids. Some are Long Island kids, but then others are from elsewhere, and they were foreign students. But they didn't too much know about this great man, John Muir, and how he worked with Theodore Roosevelt, a conservation-minded president who was actually from Long Island, a few miles from my college, in fact, as well, to create our wonderful national park system. And then we talked about the glories of the national parks, Yosemite and Yellowstone, and so a real accomplishment of nature. In fact, just recently, it was the 100th anniversary of the national park system, and PBS had this whole series about this great American all but invention to save, to preserve these beautiful patches of the planet forever.
Oh, they're going after those patches right now. Those things are already being inked. As soon as he gets in, they're going to start uranium mining in the Grand Canyon.
No question about it. And just watch as like a group of Americans that have stood up to uranium mining has been the Navajo Nation. And they've said no, and because they know all that uranium was mined there decades ago and left cancer among the Navajo, an epidemic. And they said no more uranium mining on our lands. Just watch the Trump administration
decimate them. Look,
it'll be 21st century genocide of a uranium mining type. I mean, we can go on and on and on as to, and again, we can't normalize the election of Trump. Say we've lived through tough times, bad times politically. We've lived through Reagan. We survived. We lived through Nixon, and we survived. Trump and his cohorts and his cadre and his.
You know why? Because we did not survive through George Bush. George Bush and the Democrats, I fault the Democrats for clicking their heels and saying Sig Heil. The Democrats brought us the Unpatriot Act, the NDAA. They have refused to stand up. We now have John Bolton, who was the Undersecretary of State, who convinced Bush to get us out of the International Criminal Court to exempt Americans from being prosecuted. And now the U.S. doesn't recognize that court, and there are over 100 countries who do. And this is how the United States could carpet bomb Iraq with depleted uranium weapons, because those weapons are illegal around the world. And this, for Bolton is being considered to be...
He's being, I was just going to say, there's a piece out today about this man Bolton,
He's going to be the Secretary of State. He is going to be the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, America, I shudder to think what has going to, I don't know if you've heard this story that I've shared, but, in 2008 or 9 it was, I contacted Mike Pence's office, I think it was 9, and told him that I disagreed. I saw him on C-SPAN boasting that he had refused to reinstate unemployment benefits for Americans right before Christmas. They love to cut off the benefits right before Christmas, right? So I called up and said, look, I don't mind us extending the benefits for these people, even if it increases the deficit a little bit. We're funding the military. These people deserve this. It might harm somebody in New York. They might freeze to death this winter. Their office, Mike Pence's office, called up and reported me to the Capitol Police and said I threatened to murder their staff.
Hey.
Yes, I got investigated by the Capitol Police. And I was so angry. I wrote a big, long letter to the president, to my elected officials, nary a word from any of them. But the reason I share this story is that is the long arm of intimidation we can expect out of the Trump-Pence. They are going to finger anybody they want. Journalists are going to start getting harassed. The Trump KKK hats are going to start coming out. And I think what we need to do is organize at a local level and refuse to let these fascists take over like they did in Germany. This is just an outrage.
As I say, it can't be normalized. It must be challenged. It must be fought vigorously. And
you know who we have to push is the Democratic Party. They have got to find their courage feet. They have got to stop being such mealy-mouthed cowards going, well, gee, you think Bernie would have won? I was livid when I heard that. Of course he would have won, and they knew it. And they did it intentionally because they thought all of us were just complete dumbasses willing to follow them down the road with the Pied Piper. I mean, it is so annoying. This is the thing. See, the GOP, they don't have to worry about their base. Their base just follows them anywhere. They don't care because they are based on misogyny and bigotry. At the core of the GOP ticket is misogyny and bigotry. That's why we're seeing the KKK hats, people getting emboldened, wearing their little Trump hats, saying, my daughter's friend had her hijab pulled off her head on a bus yesterday. She was freaked out. Some guy came up and grabbed it off of her head and said, you're not wearing this anymore. This is our country. The girl was... He violated her private space. He assaulted her verbally. I mean, that is a frightening act for a young woman who is like 23 years old to be wearing a hijab, doing nothing wrong, and some guy comes up and grabs her scarf and pulls it off of her head.
Well, last night I moderated here on Long Island in New York a post-mortem. The word mortem should be emphasized. On the Trump election. It was a panel. It was sponsored by the Press Club of Long Island, which in fact I was the founding president of in 1974, and I was very pleased, as depressing as the issue and the issues were and are, to moderate the panel last night. And constituency after constituency in this country, peoples after peoples, are going to be subject to the horrors of Donald Trump and his people. And one of the major focus, of course, at a press club was Trump and the press. And there was a very important piece. This week after the election in Slate, responsible website, piece by Justin Peters. Journalists should be terrified, and the piece begins: a strong, independent press. And I read this last night at this forum. It was actually in the auditorium of the newspaper Newsday here on Long Island. And I read Peters' excellent piece, which you can get online. He writes, a strong, independent press, not as a necessary check. This is what Trump feels. A strong, independent press, he feels, is not a necessary check on accumulated power in America, but a bothersome impediment to the accumulation of that power. And he almost certainly will use the office of the presidency to bring the press to heel. And Peters writes that he expects one of the first moves would be against the legal protections for the press in America. Trump, this is just a few months ago in a speech in Fort Worth, says, if I win, I'm going to open up libel laws, so when they write purposely, these reporters who he's described as scum and so forth repeatedly, purposely put out negative, horrible, and false articles, we can sue them and win lots of money. And let me just explain, I think this is a real great concern to the constituency of people in journalism and doing journalism in America. In 1964, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a very, very important decision, Earl Warren from your West Coast was the Chief Justice, and the Supreme Court, in a case which was called the New York Times versus Sullivan, it was the Sullivan case, ruled that to sue for libel when a public official is involved, what you have to, from the outset, be able to show was that the article or the TV program, what have you, was written with knowledge that it was false and put out with reckless disregard of the falsity, and also was put out with malice. Maybe some listeners seen that old film, great film with Paul Newman, Absence of Malice. So because of this 1964 decision, the press in the United States has been able to do investigative reporting in connection with public officials like never before. And this is very unusual. I mean, a few years back, I was asked to speak in Sydney, Australia, on American libel law, and in particular this breakthrough of a ruling which allows the press which is what the press is supposed to do in this country, to challenge power, to challenge authority. This is our duty, not just to report on what officials say.
Frankly, Karl, this is how why the Democrats stayed home. That story about Donna Brazil being given the questions by CNN literally drove the nail in the coffin. It made so many people who said they couldn't vote for Trump decide they could not vote for Clinton.
Well, let me just jump on. I think the way Trump might move on this, as he packs the Supreme Court with all kind of characters, judicial versions, I suppose, of Giuliani and Chris Christie and Newt Gingrich, I shouldn't say judicial, but what he considers to be judicially fitting versions of this group of characters that constitute his very small inner circle. All you need, and I tell my students when I lecture on the libel laws in this country, and this very important, they call it the New York Times rule, that it was so important and so so much of a breakthrough and so wonderful. But all you need, can't take it for granted, all you need is a new makeup of the Supreme Court of media-hating, press-hating justices like in the footprints of Trump, and it's all gone. It's all over. Watch the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, which was a breakthrough as well, and didn't exist in other countries and doesn't exist in most countries. But here in the United States, through the Freedom of Information Act, which has been the way and we've talked about this on your show, how I've been able to expose the use of nuclear power in space by the United States by sending NASA and the Department of Energy and the National Nuclear Laboratories Freedom of Information Act letters to give me information about what they're doing and the dangers of the use of nuclear power in space. And largely I've been able to do this work because of the Freedom of Information Act. And I'm not going to support Lyndon Johnson for sure, but he did and got us deeper and deeper into the Vietnam War and so forth. But he signed into law the Freedom of Information Act back in the 1960s. Watch the Trump group, watch Trump with his burning hatred of the press, go after the Freedom of Information Act and try to either undo it or to just water it down in such a way that he'll hamper its use. I mean, this is the box that journalists are going to be in, and they have to. They can't stand for it. They can't normalize it. Every constituency in this country, whether it's of the Latinos and there's millions now today of Hispanics, of Latinos, in such fear that Trump's he wants to create an entity that would move and grab and deport Latino after Latino all around the millions of Latinos in this country. If one is gay or my son Adam Grossman is an attorney in Riverhead here in New York and has many gay clients who was telling me over dinner just this is the night after the election. Adam was talking about all day long. He was getting calls from now legally married gay folk, so fearful of their marriages being, I don't know if the word is annulled, but eliminated. Right. I mean, you get to nuclear weapons.
Yeah, with Trump, when you're talking about the press, yesterday was his first meeting with Obama, right? When he got out of it, his first words out of his mouth was untrue. And I don't know if it's because I saw this is a story I saw on Slate, and he was talking about his first meeting with the president. And he said, well, the meeting was going to last for 10 or 15 minutes, and we were just going to get to know each other. He said, but we met an hour and a half, and it could have been a lot longer. This is where it's really deceptive. The meeting was scheduled for an hour. They did not tell the press until it was going on for a half an hour. So, and when they left, they did not notify the Washington press that the president-elect was leaving. They just left and got on the Trump plane and didn't tell any of the reporters. They did not follow. They have no regard for the reporters or the protocol or any of the Well, in fact, the Associated Press, which is not some way out the AP has a story running today. You can get it online about that meeting yesterday and how Trump just broke the normal protocol. Normally, there's a grouping of reporters who go on the airplane with the president-elect. Though, Karl, I can hear a lot of people saying who voted for Trump going, that's what he's supposed to do. The media is part of the problem, and so his disrespect for the media is him fixing the problem of the corrupt media. There is support behind him disregarding the media. There are people that hate the media for being part of the machine that is destroying our Constitution and destroying our way of life.
The thing about the media that people have to understand, the press, is that it's not some singular entity. There's all kind of media. I mean, it could be the National Review, and just let me know, the National Review, which has been since William Buckley, the late William Buckley, was the mainstay of the National Review, a very, very conservative publication, and George Will, of all people, and of all places, the National Review, called the 2016 presidential campaign a long national nightmare. So this is from a conservative perspective. Obviously, my concern, and all of our concerns, I think, is whether this long national nightmare will continue. And then you go to the Progressive magazine, and you go to, I mean, there's all kind of varieties of media. There's also the media that establishment media. And I'm a professor of journalism. I developed a course at SUNY Westbury years ago, Politics of Media. And I talk about sexism historically in terms of media. I talk about racism in terms of media. I mean, the first journalism position I had, I was an intern at the Cleveland Press. This goes way back, 1960. It was what was called a co-op position through Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, where I began college. And, just to start, why I got into journalism and what Trump doesn't like about journalism, because I wasn't thinking about being a journalist. I knew nothing about being a reporter, being a journalist. But my girlfriend at Antioch wanted to get a job at a hospital, Cleveland General Hospital, working with kids with tuberculosis. That was a problem still back then. And I wanted to be with my girlfriend, who indeed, that was 1960, who I woke up with this morning, in fact. But that's how I got to Cleveland, and I had to select a job. And I was one as a copy boy at the Cleveland Press. And above the entrance of the Cleveland Press, above the entrance was the slogan of the paper. In fact, it was is the slogan of the Scripps Howard newspapers. Give light, it says, and the people will find their own way. And what I saw in 1960 at that newspaper was a grouping of journalists. So they weren't called investigative reporters in 1960. They were no longer called muckrakers. The term investigative reporting gets into the journalistic parlance in late 60s, early 70s. Muckrakers it's a term used 1900, 1914 was the muckraking era. Theodore Roosevelt actually applied that term to crusading journalists at that time. But in any case, I was so inspired by seeing those journalists give people the light and problems. As a copy boy, sometimes I'd be assigned at night to sit in the city room, and nobody would be there. Maybe one or two reporters might be there, but often just me. And people would call with stories, and if it was a story about some suburban event, I would give it to the suburban desk, or something happening in the city of Cleveland to the city desk. But if it was some horror story, was some story of danger, of corruption, I'd write a little memo and give it to this grouping of about a dozen investigative reporters. And what amazed me, a kid from I was 19 years old, was to see, actually 1960, I was 18 years old, was to see that story published in the Cleveland Press, and the problem about half the time resolved. And this is what journalism can do. This is the power of the press. Now, many, many years later, that was again 1960, 40, 56 years later, having done many exposés myself, because my specialty has been doing investigative reporting in books, on television, on radio, in fact, in print, now a lot on the internet. What my experience has been is half the time when you as an investigative reporter do an exposé, it'll solve the problem. I mean, my work to stop the Shoreham nuclear power plant from going into operation here in Long Island. And Shoreham was supposed to be the first of 7 to 11 nuclear power plants on Long Island. My work has been credited with being very important in terms of that successful fight. I can go on with other what I view as
saying. So it does
accomplishments.
Matter the free and fair press. So this is one of the things that's being challenged. We're shortly running out of time, so I want to get through to this point. And this is of grave concern to me, is this whole kind of pushback from the people who feel like they're the alternative media, who are pushing this agenda that George Soros is funding the objections against Trump. That George Soros is the one out there funding these quasi-fake racists, that really Trump is not the racist, not the bigoted misogynist, that all of us who are afraid of him really are just using his words from 10, 15 years ago that he's matured as a person.
It's not his words from, nobody's going into the attic and getting some old speech that he made in 19...
It's his attitude now.
Every week, whether it was getting off that bus and talking about how he can grope women because he was so powerful, or whether he talks about Latinos being murderers and rapists, or, go every week, until the last week. And the last week he kept saying, well, he was being directed to stay on course, to not say a crazy thing or another and the thing I just want to mention before we close, really, the biggest worry I have of this thin skin character has to do with his finger on the nuclear button. I mean, if there's a situation where the President of the United States has to, we have to put our trust in the judgment of the President of the United States and the wisdom of the President. And what do we have? We have a man of no judgment. We have a man of no wisdom.
John Bolton in his Secretary of State.
Well, again, there will be a military officer next to Donald Trump all the time. And here's a guy who said about nuclear weapons, well, if we have them, why don't we use them? He apparently feels that nuclear atomic bombs and hydrogen bombs are a practical tool in terms of war. In fact, these are. We're talking about apocalypse now, and nobody should. I teach, so thankfully, my students haven't been able to go through what I went through. But when I was a school kid in Brooklyn, New York, they gave us, and I don't know where you grew up, Lonnie, if you had this experience, but they gave us dog tags to wear. We did duck and cover drills.
Yes.
Every couple of weeks you went under the desk, yes. And you were so fearful of atomic.
We were afraid of the communists. We were really afraid that Russia would attack America. And that is what they're frothing up right now, that, this is why they like Trump, because they say that Hillary Clinton, for sure, a lot of people have told me this comment, at least we averted World War III and I disagree 100%.
Well,
I think that they believe that Clinton would
I think this is predicated on Trump's relationship with Putin. People somehow thought that Hillary, who has a very realistic dislike and suspicion about this Putin, this new Stalin.
Ex-KGB officer.
He's an ex-KGB colonel. They thought, well, maybe because of Trump's relationship. There's just a piece in the New York Times today, this morning, about the Trump organization's communications through the last few months with Russian officials. Apparently there's been so that was the argument that Trump, because of his, but there's other people in this world who, the Chinese, the North Koreans, it could be the Iranians before we know it, with nuclear weapons. And the stance to me, and I've said this on your show before, is that we have to work as hard as we can to get rid of nuclear power plants and to get rid of nuclear weapons, to make the whole planet nuclear free.
They need to be shut down yesterday, frankly. All of them.
Absolutely. And in terms of nuclear weapons, these are not practical tools. The use of nuclear weapons, and particularly with hydrogen bombs now, they make Nagasaki and Hiroshima, pale in comparison to the damage that would be done. And here there are submarines, dozens of submarines, our submarines in the oceans around the world, with missiles ready to go. There are silos all over, particularly the upper Midwest, the Dakotas and so forth, with nuclear weapons in them, ready to go. There are B-52s yet still, and B-2s and B-1s on tarmacs today, ready to be. And the Russians have the same deal going. The Chinese also have. And so we're really, Helen Caldicott is so important in this regard. We're in a hair-trigger situation when it comes to nuclear weapons, and we have a man who is coming into office who is completely, thoroughly, totally untrustworthy because of his temperament, his emotionality, his lack of
bigotry. He could care less how many people he harms. He has no regard for anyone on this planet. He's a complete. See, this is my thing about Trump. This is why I told my daughter, we have to go gray. We have to treat him like the narcissist he is. He feeds on our fear. These people feed on our fear. They are narcissistic sociopaths. And I believe that Hillary Clinton is exactly in that same park. But Hillary Clinton would not have opened the doors up for the KKK to feel like they can. I mean, I have a transgender niece. I have a nephew who's half black. My daughter is gay or bisexual. And, this is really frightening for me with my own family members. We're all petrified of the KKK hats coming out, and we have already seen it happening. So we have got to get, I told them, you know what, first we have to get gray. We can't let them see our fear. Second, we have to get smart and we have to organize and we have to push back. Just because they decide they're the racist bigots does not mean that's going to be our country.
Absolutely. And the term this is an old labor slogan of a century ago, organize, organize, organize.
Yep.
And this is a moment, sometimes the bad guys win, and now it's beyond the bad guys who have won. And we're going to have to, we must fight back.
And you know what we have to do, Karl? We also have to be prepared to take in those Trump supporters who are going to be shocked at what their candidate is going to do. When they feel so betrayed by this guy, the first thing out of his mouth was, now it's Secretary Clinton. She's done a great service, and she's done really well for our country. Instead of, I'm going to throw you in jail. Without even flipping a switch on the first second he gets to become the president-elect, he flips a switch and goes straight into being establishment.
This is a con man. And, this is his history. He tries to con people. And he will try to con people as usual. But, again, the issues here, whether it's nuclear power plants and his designing a revival of nuclear power in this country, whether it's going to have more fracking done in America than ever, whether it's to get rid of the EPA, whether it's to pack the Supreme Court, whether it's to create this little immigration police army and go like what we did to the Japanese during World War II, round Latinos up and get rid of 11 million.
That is what they want
to pack the Supreme Court with. There's enough. We have Clarence Thomas. We have him on the Supreme Court. We're going to have more of that type of strange. These are strange people that surround Trump, and the most strange of all. The most dangerous of all is Donald Trump. I mentioned before beyond nuclear, people who are, and we're going to need on that front to stop what they'll be doing with nuclear power,
get involved with Beyond Nuclear, with the Nuclear Information and Resource Service. This is a time to look up, if you've not ever before, the website of Greenpeace and get involved with Greenpeace in terms of groups that are anti-war, and who knows what kind of wars this thin-skinned character will get us involved with. There's many excellent Women's International League for Peace and Freedom is, in fact, way on top of my list as a favorite. In terms of gay rights, important. He's also going to move against abortion. He's going to try to get a Supreme Court to undo Roe versus Wade. That has to be fought. There's so many fronts that we're going to have to fight. This is as I said earlier, horrifying. This is, as was said again, of all people, George Will follows our long national nightmare, this endless presidential campaign. These things should be made shorter, incidentally. And we're heading now to, this is not something we can wake up and it's going to go away. We are in a nightmare, and we're going to have to stand up, and we're going to have to, all of us, fight, and it'd be best if we fight together. Right. You know, I mean, there's so many constituencies, as I've mentioned, who Trump is out after. We have to have a big tent. We have to realize that this guy is a threat from A to Z in terms of liberties and the American way of life. He's a person.
Mike Pence is a frightening character. So that's my anxiety. Trump is the dumb guy in the room, and he's the schmo being used by these people. They all know. They tell him. That's why he literally said, "Oh well, we were supposed to only meet the president for 10 or 15 minutes." What kind of idiot thinks you're going to win the presidency and go meet the president, the sitting president, and sit with him for 10 or 15 minutes to shake hands? What a ridiculous statement. Either he lied or he was misinformed by his group of people around him, and my guess is the latter. He's a complete head dunce, and they are using him. I mean,
well, in terms of deception and lies, it also should be noted, and here, you know, since Nixon, integrity has become an issue in terms of, well, the media has zeroed in on issues of integrity it never had before in the wake of Watergate and Nixon. And here we have a man who's a serial liar. He's not into truth. I mean, you just go to so many websites. Just put Trump lies, and you'll get hundreds of lies made not in 1967, but in recent months.
This, Karl, though, because they all lied. I mean, we had Hillary Clinton saying that she ran when she went to some place overseas. She had to run under duck of cover, when we have pictures of her actually having a ceremony. So they all, this is where it gets all mixed up. He can lie, she lies, the whole thing. This is why the bitter pill, this is why people were so sick of the establishment and Hillary Clinton, that they believe that Donald Trump, being an outsider, believing he's an outsider, might be the way to go, when in fact he's being manipulated by some very un-American fascistic organizations that really do want to strip us of all of our civil rights.
Yeah, well, the great investigative journalist I.F. Stone famously said, all governments lie. Yeah. So, that's true. All governments lie. That's why, thankfully, there are
That's why we get to
investigative reporters and others challenging.
So,
but
guess what, Karl? Our time has ended. We have 20 seconds left. For everybody who's listening to us, thank you for joining us. Please go to Karl's website, karlgrossman.com. Karl, thank you for being a friend to our show and joining us, and I hope you will come back. It's been a great, lively conversation. I'm so grateful I got to chat with you today.
Anytime, and I just want to add, all governments lie, but we have the king of liars who will be the president. This is the worst.
Stop him. Put your courage feet on. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you, Karl.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.